Do you ever feel like manifestation is just another thing on your to-do list that you don't have time for? Like your spiritual practice is something that you have to do? Honestly, you're not alone because I felt that way too. Something that's really changed my relationship with manifestation is blending it into my lifestyle so that no matter what I'm doing, I'm also manifesting. I call this manifestation as a lifestyle, and it's single handedly made the entire manifestation journey more enjoyable for me. And I've seen my desires show up with a lot more ease. Manifesting as a lifestyle has made manifestation go from feeling like a task to something I just naturally do because it's who I am. If you'd like to learn more about this, I've created a step by step guide for you. I'll link it in my show notes so you can check it out. You're listening to the Affirmation Addict podcast with Pyle Corley. This podcast will teach you about the power of affirmations while making manifestation easy and accessible for you in order to enhance your spiritual consciousness. Thank you so much for being here, and now it's time to get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Affirmation Addict podcast. My name is Pyle, and today we are talking all friendships. So, friendships have been a really interesting topic in my life because I think I have a very different definition of how I approach friendships and what I expect from friendships. And I've noticed and learned over the years how important friendships are, but also how much friendships can impact like our daily life and peace and just the different things that can cause stir-ups in friendships. And so I wanted to talk just all about friendships, how to have meaningful, fulfilling friendships that don't feel like they're one-sided, or they don't feel like they're super triggering, or they don't feel fake. Like, let's get past that stage of fake friendships that don't feel authentic. And how do we show up into friendships that are genuine and real? And also, how do you navigate being hurt in friendships and all of those things? Because I think I've felt all of those. I also think there's different types of friendships, like spiritual friendships versus convenient friendships, and college friends and childhood friends. There's so many different categories of friends. And my journey with friendships, I think, is so interesting. It's so complicated. And I don't think anybody in my life, maybe except for Tom, fully understands my role in friendships because I think they've changed so much over the years. Their definition has changed so much over the years. So I'm excited to really talk about it completely honestly, and share with you what all I have gone through and what's helped me really create meaningful, non-draining, fulfilling friendships. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is like, why are friendships such a big deal? And I think it's because connection is seriously so important. I think a friend is someone you can call a stranger a friend. You can call that person at your coffee shop a friend. You can call anybody a friend. And I think it's such a big term that so many people can fall into that category of being a friend, where when it comes to bringing someone into our life and they're not like a romantic partner, they end up being a friend, and that can have so many different layers. And all of our relationships, whether they're romantic or not, are reflections of us. And so I think our friendships and these connections can bring up actually a lot of different shadows, a lot of insecurities, and actually teach us a lot about ourselves that I think we don't take the time to learn in a friendship just because we think, oh, it's a friendship, so it's not as big of a deal. However, what I've learned over the years is a lot of my patterns that I noticed in friendships weren't because I kept attracting the same type of people, or maybe I was attracting the same type of people, but I was actually the one doing that. I didn't really put myself in the equation of my friendships because it felt like something totally unrelated. And in the manifestation space and the spiritual journey, I think friends are one of like those last categories that you think of. Most people, when they start this journey, it's a lot about self. It's a lot about self-love, self-confidence. Then it kind of dives into your career, your success, abundance, relationships, soulmate, maybe family. And then it goes into like your home, your car, travel, all of those types of experiential things where friendships start to become kind of the last thing because they're not necessarily like a requirement, but they're always there. So it's a really weird area to navigate. And I'm at this point in my life where I'm really, really taking a second look at friendships. What do they mean to me? How do I show up in them? And I've gone through so many different types of friendships and different phases of friendships that what I realized is I never actually thought my friendships were important enough because there was no bond for it to be certain, right? Like the weird thing about a friendship is it's a mutual choice. It doesn't feel as binding, although all relationships are ultimately a choice. Yeah, theoretically, right? But it doesn't feel as binding as the label of like a family member or a sibling or a romantic partner or even like a coworker. A friendship, like one day you can just walk out of someone's life and stop talking to them. And that could be the end of a friendship when the year before you guys were spending every waking minute together. So it's such a weird dynamic that I think impacts so much of who we are, but I don't think we put enough importance to it because it's not our biggest priority, to be honest. And I know for a very long time, it was not my biggest priority until I started feeling unsatisfied in my friendships. There was a point like in college and even like my childhood, I felt very satisfied in my friendships. Like there was drama, all of those things, right? Like there was always something, but I never felt the frustration. I never felt unsatisfied in my friendships until COVID really. COVID really took a turn for me. So I went through this phase during COVID where none of my friendships felt good enough. They all just felt like there was no depth or I couldn't be my full self. And I had all of these shadows coming up and I constantly could complain. And it was so interesting because it was like, these were people I spent so much time with. Some of them were my best friends, but how could all of a sudden all of my friendships be taking a negative turn? Like I realized like that was me, something going on within me, and it actually wasn't my friendships. So if you're in a position where you're noticing like all of your friendships seem to be kind of just having a weird dynamic, ask yourself, are you actually maybe the one who's changing? And are you having too many expectations from your friends? Because that's what I learned. I was in this phase where I wanted something called more spiritual friendships. I wanted more people in my life that I could talk to about spirituality, that wouldn't be gossiping, that I could be nerding out over singing bowls with and playing with oracle cards with, and it having no implication about like my personal life. Like I think I wanted like something totally new. And I actually adversely, and I think not necessarily wrongfully, but I don't think I handled it in the most strategic way. I definitely took like a 1 year hiatus from all my friends. I didn't see any of my friends for the whole year. Also, COVID was happening, so it helped. But it was so interesting because anytime I would see those friends, I would just feel so frustrated. And I was like, I love these people. They're not even bad people. Like this is something going on within me. And that's when I realized I needed to forgive myself and them because I did feel hurt by certain people for certain things that happened. And I realized I'm putting way too much expectation on my friendships to be exactly who I am. And that's where I think the interesting part is when you think of a friendship, I think in relationships, in family, and in soulmates, we acknowledge that we're not all going to be exactly the same. So when we think of a friendship, I think we assume that they're going to be exactly who we are, same hobbies, same interests. And in a way, that's what you bond over with friends. Like you do the same things together, you do things you enjoy together. And I think friendships start to take a negative turn when someone handles something different than you would, when someone doesn't show up in the same way you would, and when someone just doesn't act the way you would, or it feels out of alignment when they're not showing up exactly the same as you are. I think we start to really get frustrated with that friendship. And that's what started happening to me. I started evolving and I noticed that my friends were not showing up in different very areas of their life in the same way I would. And I started getting really upset. I wasn't mean to them. I didn't say anything. I just quieted down and I wasn't as excited to hang out with them. And that's very unusual for me. Actually, I'm such a friends girl. I love socializing. I love going out. So the fact that like I didn't want anything to do with them and I had nothing to talk to them about was very weird until I realized that I was actually putting way too many expectations on them. I was putting so much pressure on all of my friends to be exactly the same. I don't expect them to be spiritual necessarily, but expecting them to show up like ethically and morally in life in the exact same way I would. And I think that's putting a lot of bit of pressure because there's certain things that I would handle differently, but that doesn't mean they're doing it wrong or they're a bad person. They just might have a different approach and they're living life through their lens. Like I wasn't able to accept my friends for the way they were showing up. I was expecting them to show up in the way I wanted to without communicating it, just assuming it and just expecting it. And so that's where the rift started. And I felt really bad about it. So I eventually went over and I talked to all those people who I like wasn't talking to. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. I had that open conversation with them, but I also did a lot of forgiveness work internally. I forgave them, even though technically they did nothing wrong. Technically, but I forgave them and I also forgave myself. That's what forgiveness work is about. The other thing, the other F word I wanted to talk about actually was flexibility. And I think this is something that was so hard for me to be okay with is being flexible in my friendships. Like just because someone isn't showing up for me in the exact same way I would show up for them doesn't mean that it gives me permission to just write them off or not show up for them. And that was a really hard pill for me to swallow because I had this impression that friendships meant it is people who are just like you. And the thing I wasn't prepared for is that we all change and we all are going to change in different ways. And the people you started one phase of life with, they're going to show up in this next phase of life very differently. And that's okay. You're allowed to still be friends, but being friends with people through multiple phases of life requires acceptance, requires forgiveness, requires flexibility. And that took me a very long time to recognize. I didn't realize how much we were all changing. And I assumed we were all changing in the same way. So for example, you might have childhood friends, you might have your college friends, you might have your work friends, you might have friends from one city. So you might have all of these different categories of friends. And if you want to continue nurturing these friendships as you guys move through different categories, as you move forward, that requires acceptance, that requires forgiveness, that requires flexibility because you're not going to always show up in the same way as you move through all of these different phases of life. So for example, I have a really close group of childhood girls who I grew up with. We spent all of our weekends together. And we inherently in who we are so similar, but we're also so different, which is why we all work. There's a group of 5 of us, and we all used to live in Arizona, and now we all live in different places. I recently moved back here. And so nurturing those friendships over the years, we sometimes hadn't talked for a year or two or seen each other for a year or two, but there was a mutual aspect of effort. It wasn't always equal effort. Some people were in medical school. Some people were studying their PhD. Some people were living in totally different countries. So we weren't always all together. We weren't always all on the same page. But I believe our friendship works is because I think all of us are willing to accept and forgive and be flexible with each other rather than put so much pressure on the relationship and how it has to be. And it has to be the exact same as it was when we were like 5 to 10 years old. So it's allowed to change. And I think that comfort with change and that flexibility with we're allowed to be different people and still choose to show up for each other. And certain friendships aren't meant to be there forever. Certain people aren't meant to be in your life forever. I think at this point in life, and everyone listening to this podcast, we have this inherent compassion where whether or not someone hurt us, whether or not we're still friends with someone, we still wish the best for them. So for me, even if I had some best friends that I don't see anymore, that I'm not close with anymore, I still wish the absolute best for them. And I will speak to them only with love. And I will absolutely go get coffee with them if I could, but it's not a requirement to nurture every friendship, but there's a level and there's a fine line that you get to decide is this a friendship I want to keep or nurture? And is this a friendship I'm willing to be flexible and accepting in? Because I think those are the 2 questions to ask yourself as you carry on a friendship, because there is multiple friendships that I not necessarily regret, but I wish were still here. And I've had awkward kind of reunions where it's like we literally were best friends and then we stopped talking and then we had a mutual friend thing and then we came into each other's lives and it's like, are we going to talk about the fact that we literally lived together and spent every night together and now we're like strangers? Or does it feel back to normal? And do we want to make that effort? And are you willing to apologize and drop your ego in the friendship? So I think that's a really interesting part of friendships, especially as you go older, is I think you start to realize how many friendships are built and kept out of convenience, and then how many friendships are maintained, nurtured, and accepted as life happens and as change comes, because I think those are two very, very different things. I always get a ton of questions in my DMs from people asking how I can manifest X. The truth is, you can really manifest anything as long as it's for the greatest good. And if you're having trouble manifesting something right now, or you feel stuck on your journey, I have a really beautiful resource I've made for you. It's a free quiz. It's called the Manifestation Archetype Quiz. And it's something that I've created so you can find out your manifestation style to give you more clarity on your spiritual journey. After taking the quiz, you're going to receive the best resources for your specific archetype to help you attract your desires based on where you're at and what you want to create. So you can find a link to the quiz in the show notes or just head to my website at www.affirmation-addict.com. I learned that so many of my friendships were out of convenience, but the ones I nurtured, I was treating them as a kind of convenience friendship sometimes, where I expected like, okay, we changed together. Because convenience friendships, I think, are the ones that you're very reflected because you're going through the same thing. Like you're working or you're a gym partner. Those types of friendships, you have a lot of similar milestones. But friendships where you're completely different is a totally different ballgame. Or maybe you were so similar at one point and now you're completely different. Like I don't think any of my friends who I met from ages like 0 to like 23 are similar to me at all in my spirituality, in being an entrepreneur or any of that. So I can't talk to I can talk to them, but like, that's not what we talk about. I don't talk to most of my friends about my spirituality. I don't talk to them about my business. I don't talk to them even about like my relationship with Tom, because we all have such different ways of showing up. And that's actually completely okay, because I don't think with having a friendship and any friendship, you have to talk about every area of your life. I can if they ask me, but it doesn't have to be that whole purpose of the conversation. I don't have to express all of me. Like we're so multidimensional that our friendships can also be multidimensional. And one person doesn't have to encapsulate and replicate and understand all aspects of who you are. So now I don't get upset or frustrated, or I don't feel like I'm not seen if some of my friends don't understand my spiritual side or my way of very natural living or my way of life, where me and Tom both work from home at the age of 25 and they both completely are 9-to-5 office people. So I don't expect anybody to fully understand me. And I think that's a different part of friendships is I think we're seeking being seen and we're seeking being understood. And it's a really hard question, but are you willing to be misunderstood or not fully seen in your friendships? Because I think that requires a different level of confidence where ultimately you're not seeking validation from your friendships still. So this is kind of a rant. I don't even know if this made sense or if this resonates or this is just a me problem. But I think it's so interesting to just reflect on your friendships. And I'm not even talking about the drama side, because I think when I spend time with most of the people in my life, I would say a good amount of it is talking about drama or complaining or talking about the past, none of which are bad things necessarily, but just like this isn't a value add. And that used to really make me upset. That used to really, really bother me. But it's like not everything has to be a value add and a growth focus and evolution focus. Sometimes friendships can just be to enjoy each other's company. And what can I learn? What can I enjoy? What beauty can I find in this relationship, even if it's not a purely wholesome relationship. Do I have to participate in the gossip? No, that's a choice I get to make. But I'm allowed to sit there and say, hey, let's talk about something else. I can show up and try and navigate the conversation a little differently. It doesn't have to be like a esoteric, super deep conversation, but we can talk about like, I don't know, like plants or food or clothes more than we can talk about how much someone hurt us in the past, you know? So there's different things, different approaches to handling friendships, but I'm really curious, what is your take on friendships and how much do your friendships actually dictate your life? I know for me, for a long time, I would make a lot of my decisions based off of friendships. And then I think with friendships comes status. And it's like, are those people actually your real friends? What I've learned about my real friends is my real friends, I could probably count on two hands. In what my real friends mean to me is they are people who understand that we are not the same and they give me space to be who I am, but they're also willing to have fun and be nice. Like for me, my fundamental thing about a friendship is you're a nice person. If you're mean, it is very hard for me to continue being friends with you because I just can't do that. However, if you are someone who's going through a hard time and you're angry at the world, I get it and I will support you through that. But for me, like what a true friendship means is we embrace each other's differences and we celebrate that, but we also just enjoy each other's company, even if it's in small spurts. I don't have to have friends who I spend 6 hours with. Like I can spend an hour with someone and that counts as a friendship. So putting less pressure on your friendships, and I think this is the common theme, right? Putting less pressure on all areas of your life, but specifically friends. I think we kind of dish off so many things onto our friends. We put expectations. We need validation. We want the external approval, but we also want to feel like we belong and that we fit in and that we're worthy. I think our friendships can actually give us so much insight into some of the insecurities, some of the shadows, some of the deeper self-healing work we can do. And so I've learned so much over my friendships to the point where now I've had some people in my life who I really care about, like really hurt me recently. And it doesn't even bother me. It bothers me in the moment. Absolutely. Obviously, I'm talking about it, but I'm able to move past it and say, you know what? Like, that's what they're going through and that's okay. And I'm willing to accept that. So I'm at a point where I'm willing to accept and support and show up for people who have hurt me, but I will obviously show up differently now that I know, but I'm not willing to hold a grudge and let that redefine who I am and let that take away my peace. Rather, it's okay, you hurt me. I didn't appreciate that. How do we move forward? And do we want to move forward? That's kind of the different approach of navigating like a hardship in a friendship rather than saying, you hurt me, you need to fix this, you need to apologize. It's like, no, like you hurt me and you're right in whatever you brought up. Like you're valid in how you wanted to handle that. I accept that. But because it's something I don't align with, that gives me a different lens of how I'm going to show up in this friendship. Maybe I won't drop everything for you. Maybe I won't, I don't know, maybe I won't go out of my way for you, but if you need something, I will still be here. I'm not just going to be mean. So those are the different boundaries I think that are really fun and powerful to explore. And like, are you willing to forgive your friends? Forgiveness doesn't mean, okay, I get it, and you still hold a grudge. Forgiveness means you fully release and move forward from something. And that's two very different things. So that is something I am personally working on, is truly forgiving, truly loving, and coming from a place of unconditional love while still respecting my own boundaries. And I think that's a very powerful place to be in your friendship. So I hope this resonated. I would love to hear your thoughts. I know I kind of rambled. I never have a full plan on friendships, but yeah, I hope this resonated with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the podcast and share it on your social media so I know to keep creating episodes that are inspiring you to manifest. I'm so genuinely grateful for the time we shared today, and I'd love for you to join the community by following @Affirmation Addict on Instagram. To continue diving into spirituality and manifestation, head over to my website, affirmation-addict.com. Until next time, I'm sending you so much love and so much healing energy.